Hello everyone, welcome back to Abdev channel. In the last video we talked about a component annotation, right? So in today's video we will talk about at controller annotation. At controller annotation is a specialized version of at component annotation. What is that specialized version that we didn't discuss in the last video, which we targeted to know the details in today's video? Okay, so if a class is annotated with at controller annotation, then it provides features like it instructs the Spring container to manage this as a bean and its bean lifecycle. So, as we know, at controller is a combination of at component plus some special features, right? What at component does, it creates a bean and it manages the bean lifecycle, right? Similarly, at controller, the one of the feature of at controller tag annotation is it is instructing Spring container to manage the bean life cycle by the container. That is one feature. The next feature is this is also responsible. I mean, whenever we annotate a class as at controller annotation, the class will be acting as controller in MVC applications to send model and view objects. What we know that MVC architecture, right? It is an architectural style. The controller accepts the request from user interface and gives it to the model or any backend system, gives that input to the backend system or any database, and gets the data from model and gives it back to the user interface. This is what the controller does as part of the MVC architecture, right? So here in MVC architectural style, controller gives request data to model and gets back response back from the model, right? And whenever it gets the response back from the model, it updates the view. Okay, so that is about the controller at controller usage in the MVC applications, Spring Web MVC applications. That is the second feature. Okay, if you want a class to act as a MVC controller, you have to maintain that as at the rate at controller annotation. The third feature is suppose if you want to make a class as REST controller to handle REST web service requests in Spring Web MVC application, then you can use this at controller annotation. Okay, so those are the three important features that are provided to your class if a class is annotated with at controller annotation. Okay, now let us see with an example what are the we have seen basically the three properties, right? Being lifecycle management, controller for MVC applications to return model and view object, and also as a REST controller for MVC applications, right? All these three features we will see with an example. Okay, let us create one employee controller. That employee controller will be receiving MVC requests from user interface. Okay, and it will be providing it will be having two endpoints. One endpoint is to serve all employees details, the other endpoint is to send only the specific employee details. Okay, let us see that with an example all the three properties which we have seen. This is one of the project which I have created with web dependency. Okay, now let me create a controller. Employee control. I want to maintain this controller here in controller package. Employee controller. So I want to maintain this employee controller as MVC controller, right? So I have to annotate this with the at controller. Okay. The moment I mention this at controller, we have to verify whether the bean is being created or not by the container, right? So for that to verify, we have to ask container to scan even for this package, because we are not having this controller in the same package where the application exists, right? So we have to maintain this package as well. Scan base packages is equal to string array. We should be having com.add. Now we have to see the logger whether the bean is being created or not, right? So let me go there and add this logger com dot, not com, what is that, logging dot level dot org dot spring framework dot beans dot factory is equal to debug. That way we will be able to see the bean creation logs. Okay, let's run this program whether the bean is being created for the class which is annotated with that controller. Now let me take this log and put it here and see what is the controller. Employee controller, right? See, employee controller is being created as a bean. So this itself is a proof that our @controller is instructing the Spring container to create my employee controller as a bean and manage its bean lifecycle. Okay. Now next point, what we have to know, we have to maintain this controller to get the request from user interface, to serve the view, and to serve the model and view object. And we basically want to maintain this as a controller in MVC pattern, right? So for that, let us add some handler methods. Okay, this method public, and it should return model and view. Okay, what is this model and view? We will see in a bit. Okay, but this method, right? This is get employee list. This is the method. Okay, this is a get employee list, and it should accept request mapping, and I'll give the request mapping for my controller as well /emp. So localhost colon 8080 /emp, the request will come here, /emp slash the request will come to get employee list. Okay, now here I have to return model and view, right? For now, let us add void. Okay, then we'll see. Okay, so here I have to return the list of employees. Basically, let's say for example, I have to create a list of employees. Okay, so let me create a list of employee list, new array list. Let me create an employee class as well. I'll create that in Vivo package com Vivo employee. Okay, again it is a bin, it's a class, right? I want to maintain this. I want this to be maintained by Spring container, so I have to use that component. Okay, my employee class will be having private int id, private string name. Okay, string name, and I want to have a constructor with these fields. So constructor using fields. Yep, and I also want to have getter and setters for it. Now this employee class is ready. Okay, if we go to the controller now, we have to import that employee class. Yes, now let us create some objects, employee list dot add, and add those objects, new employee of new employee of id means one updev. I've created it to James. Okay, so let us return. Okay, so we have to return basically as part of this get employee list handler mapping method. We have to return this employee list. Okay, this is a model. Okay, we have to return this employee list as a model and view object. So what MVC controller in Spring Framework will do, it takes this model and updates the view and sends that model and view object to the user interface. So let us model and view. Let us return model and view from here. So model and view, return new model and view. If you see this, we are creating a model and view constructor, right? If you see this constructor, there will be a map constructor, overridden constructor, string view name, and also a map model. See this view and model. Okay, so yeah, let's use it. See, my model and view name is all employee details, and the model name is employee map. Okay, this employee map I have to create it now. How I can create map string comma list of employees. We are having the map here, right? Employee list. So list of employee. What is the map name? Employee map, or else employee model we can give. Employee model is equal to new hash map. Okay. Now we have to put employee model dot put where we have that employee list here in this employee list, right? And what is the key? We have to mention some key, right? That key we can use it here. Okay, employee list. And this is list of employees, right? So this is how we are creating a model, and this is the model here, and this is the view. Okay, this view will be loaded with the data that is present in this model, and the whole model and view object will be returned from this controller handler mapping method. Okay, now let us see how the model employee model will be applied to this view. Okay, now we have to create one template here. Okay, let's go to static main resources template and create a name, view name exactly same as all employee details. Okay, we have to create a file. Okay, all employee details.ftls. This is an extension for the template engine free market template. Okay, these template engines are helpful while we are writing HTML code to get the response or to make the service calls and to get the response, to process through the response, to display the response. Okay, they are having some inbuilt tags. So we are using that template engine here to render the response whatever that is coming in the model and view object. Okay, so all employee details.ftlh, this is a free market template. So we have to get the dependency of the free market template here. What is the dependency we have to use? Let's see it. Yeah, here let me copy it. org spring framework boot and spring boot starter. free marker. The moment I add this dependency, let's see it is downloading the jar files required for that free marker template engine, right? So that way we can use the tags that are related to render the response, okay, in this free marker template file. Now we want to print, this is giving the list of employee objects, right? This employee controller is giving the list of objects, employee details. We want to print that list of employee details in a table, okay? Now let us add a table here. Hmm? Table will be having some tr, right? Tr, let us add first row as table headers, right? ID we want to show. And what is the other attribute we have in employee? We have the name, right? And let us close the tr. As many objects we return from the employee list, those many times we have to iterate the rows in the table, right? So for that we have to maintain, we have to mention for each tag that comes with the free marker template engine, and for each tag we have to iterate through the employee list. Okay, this employee list should be same as what we have put in the model map. Okay, this is the model map, right? This is the object data, and this object data is having this key, and this key we have to iterate here. Okay, this iterate, and for each employee list we will get the each employee in this. Okay, for each employee in employee list we will create a tr. Okay, then for each attribute that is available in each employee object, we have to print the data, right? What is there? emp.id, emp.name, hash for each. We have to close it. We have to close the table. That's it, right? So this, what will happen when the moment we return model and view control from this controller, there will be a concept of view resolvers. Okay, view resolvers will take this model and view object, and the particular resolver will be particular view file will be resolved based by looking at this file, and whatever the model that is there, right, that will be added into this resolved view file by the controller. Okay, controller will be adding the model object into the view that is resolved by the view resolver. Okay, so that's all. Okay, let's run it now. We'll see how it goes. Here we are returning the model and view object from a class that is annotated with the controller. Okay, now let's see. See this parameter 0 of constructor employee required a bean of type int. See, the problem here is, here we mentioned a constructor, okay, with two argument constructor. So it is trying to, while creating a bean, will try to create an object when a class is annotated with that component, right? So it is trying to inject the data, use this constructor to create an instance. Okay, we know it, right? If we provide any constructor like this, any parameterized constructor, the JVM will not provide any zero argument constructor. So that is not provided. So container is picking up this constructor to inject the values, but we are not passing any values to it during the container startup, right? That's why it is failing. So for that, let us provide a zero argument constructor as well. So it will pick up this constructor now, and it will try to create an object for it. Now let's run it. See, it is started now, right? Now let me go to browser and hit this controller slash emp slash emp slash just slash, right? Yeah, we are getting an error now. What is this 404 error? Why is that we are getting 404 error? Let's see that. We are returning model and view also. Let me check the pom.xml file once, whether the model and view or the free marker template engine is getting injected properly or not. See, yeah, this is the problem, guys. Here we are having the test scope here, right? We should not be having this scope test for free marker. It should be same as what we have for web. Okay, now let us run it now again. It's all started properly. Now let me run it. Yeah, see this. So what is happening? It is giving us the data now. So the controller is accepting a request and it is prepare or giving the responsibility to give the model back to controller. Model is being prepared here, and model is giving model along with the view name is giving it to the model and view object. Controller is taking this model object and resolving this particular template file for this particular view and adding this model object to the view that is resolved by this to the template file that is resolved by this view. So this is one way of using at controller to make your class act as a controller to serve the HTTP requests and return the model and view object and add the model or the data that is coming from the backend to the user interface. Okay, this is one. This is the second usage which we have discussed earlier. Now let us discuss about the third usage. Okay, the third usage is about making your class by annotating with that controller and making your class to accept the requests for the RESTful web services. You're making your class as a REST controller. Okay, so for that, let me create a package project quickly to give you a demo how we can make a class as a REST controller using at controller annotation. Okay, let me create a project. This is annotation example 2, controller annotation example 2. Let me add web package. Yep. Let me close everything. Let me copy whatever we have done earlier, right? Yeah, all this from that project to here. See, what we are going to do now, we want to ensure our employee controller class act as REST controller with the help of only the controller. So model and view, instead of returning the model and view, uh, I mean this model and view we have used to make our controller as a MVC controller, right? Now we want to make our controller as a REST controller. We just have to take the request, go to the backend, or go to the database, gives the response back, either in the XML format or in the JSON format, or whatever format the server supports or the user is requesting. Okay, so I just want to return a list of employee from here. Okay, instead of model and view, we don't have to create anything. The map, putting it in a map. We just return employee list. Okay, that's it. Okay, we have the employee class, everything, right? We have the scan packages, we have the controller, we have the employee class as well. Now let's run it. Okay, we'll see if we run into any problem. Yeah. See here, okay, this is, let me stop it. Let me run it again. The controller, I mean the container is started, right? Now let me hit the URL again. See, we are getting 404 error. Let me see whether we are still getting the flow to this handler mapping or not. Get employee list. Let me run it. See, we are getting the controller. Okay, we are getting the control to your controller and also to your handler mapping. This logic is nothing but simple, very logic, right? So there is no problem. But we are not able to get the response back from the controller. So in order to send the response, whatever we are returning an object, but the client won't be able to understand your object, right? It should be in the some structured format, whether it is in the JSON format, whether it is in the XML format, or it is in the HTML format. It should be some structured format, right? The objects won't be able to understand by the client. So the object data, whatever you are returning here, it should be converted. Okay, it should be converted so that the clients will be able to understand it. Okay, so for that we have one annotation we have to use so that whatever the domain specific objects or the value objects or the transfer objects, whatever you are returning from your handler mapping methods will be converted to XML or JSON or any HTML or any other media type using the appropriate converters. Okay, and that converted object, whatever it is, right, XML or JSON, that will be added to the HTTP response object before sending it to the user or client. Okay, so for that, let's use at response body annotation. So the at response body we are using it now. Okay, now let's see. So it is started up, right? Let me trigger it from here from Postman. See this, we are getting it, right? We are getting by default in the JSON format. So this is, let me trigger it from here as well. Yeah. So here we are getting the JSON data, right? By default, whatever the data you are returning, the list of objects, right? The appropriate converter, HTTP media type converter, right, will be identified. Message converter will be identified based on the type of data your handler method is returning. That converter will convert this list into the JSON by default and puts the JSON object into the HTTP response body and gives it to the client. That's what is happening here. Okay. So how the converter defines, how the converter will be identified to convert your object before sending it to the client. It depends on the converters your application supports. Okay, suppose by default Spring Boot application supporting JSON message converter, because while getting that uh, Spring Boot starter dependencies, right, we are getting the Jackson based dependencies. That's why JSON message converter is supported by default by the Spring Boot application. Okay, so the converters identification will be depends on the how the application, what all converters the application supports, and also the produces attribute. Okay, there will be one attribute along with the request mapping. Okay, where we have to mention like this for if we have to use produces. See, produces is something like whatever the method, if at all I am getting a request to this method, I will be able to produce the outputs of this type. Okay, that's what it says the produces attribute. Suppose application slash JSON, if you mention like this, okay, so I will be able to provide the JSON. So that's what it is. Okay, let me run it again. It is still giving us the output, right? So whatever, suppose if I mention XML here, I want I want my method get employee list to produce XML based output. Okay, whenever the request coming to get employee list, let's see whether I'll get the XML output of. See, it is saying 406 not acceptable. Okay, 406 is a, okay. Let me open the request headers. What it is asking? Okay, accept application JSON. Okay, but the producers is giving application XML. Your application is by default supporting only the JSON, but you are trying to produce XML and you are asking JSON output only, but the method will support only the XML. So it depends on the producers attribute and also on the application supported attribute. Suppose if you want to generate XML based output from this method, you have to add a dependency so that the XML specific message converter will also be added. Okay, that dependency we will add it now. Okay, let us take this. What is the dependency? org dot faster, not org, com dot faster xml dot jackson dot data format. Here the artifact id we have to modify it, right? Jackson hyphen data format hyphen xml. Okay, now the application supports. See, the moment I added some dependencies related to XML, right? This one. So the application supports the XML based message converters as well. Now let's run it. It is all happening. The converters are being identified only because of this at the rate response body annotation. Okay, now let's run it. See this. The moment we added the message converters for XML, you are getting the XML based output. Okay, now application slash XML your method is generating, right? Let me check it from Postman as well. See, we are getting the XML based output also, right? Suppose if I send JSON, what it will say? See again, JSON. I am trying to accept the JSON headers. The client wants to accept only the JSON response. Okay, but server is saying I will produce only the XML based response. Even though my application is supporting XML JSON, my method is supporting only the XML, but my client is asking for the JSON based output. That's why it is not supporting it. So the message converter identification will be based on three kinds of parameters. First, whether the application accepts, whether the application supports it or not. Second, whether the handler method produces the kind of output what client is accepting it or not. Third, whether the client is accepting the required or the whatever the output format that is produced by the server or not. Here client is accepting JSON but server is producing XML. That's why we are getting this error. Suppose if you want your server to produce both JSON and XML, okay. Now let's run it and see JSON output is coming, right? Let's try with XML as well. See, XML is also coming. So based on the accept header, based on the produces value, based on the application supported message converters, your HTTP message will be your object will be converted based on the identified message converters when you specify at the date response body annotation to your handler mapping method. Okay. Now let's say for example, I have one more method. Okay. Let me copy this application slash. Here only I'll get only the employee, not the list. Get employee. What this method is doing, this method returns only one employee object, and that will be converted to XML. And this method will do both XML conversion and the JSON conversion when we annotated that method with the response body annotation. Now instead of this, we'll get uh, employee. Okay. Now let's run it. Let's run from here. See your employee. Okay, employee we have to use, right? See, it is giving me the XML output. Employee is giving me the XML output and also the JSON output. So like this, you can have any number of handler mapping methods in your controller if it is annotated with the date controller, and each handler mapping can return any type of output. One method can return XML or JSON, one method can return only XML, one method can return JSON. It depends. I mean, if one method is returning XML and JSON, right? Suppose if multiple clients are accessing the same method or the same controller or invoking the same REST service, right? One client wants it XML format, another client wants it JSON format in the response. So they can send it in the accept header. The my method will provide whatever response they need, whatever structure they need, whatever the output type they need. My method will provide them in the same manner by looking at their accept header. Okay. So if you see this here, along with the at the date controller, if you want your objects to be sent in the HTTP response, then you have to use at the date response body annotation on all of your handler mapping methods in order to send the data in the HTTP response body. Suppose if I remove this at response body from here, we have seen that error, it is not able to return because the object data is not being converted to in the understandable format of the client. Instead of mentioning it there, let us try to put it here because we want all our handler mapping methods should return something. Then in such case, let's try to use it here. Okay, let me let me run it. Now if you see this, EMP is giving JSON response, EMP is giving XML response. Now slash employee is also giving the XML response. Okay, slash employee, will it gives me the JSON response? It will not, it is not giving because my method is not supporting it. My method supports only the JSON response. So instead of adding that at response body annotation on each handler mapping method, you can also add it along with the at controller tag at the controller level itself, at the class level itself. Okay, but in order to send the response as part of your RESTful web service request from a class that is annotated with the at the date controller, you should always be having the at response body. So we have discussed in detail about all the three features, like how the controller is make at controller annotation is making your class to be managed by the Spring container because it is a add-on on top of at component annotation. We have seen how to return model and view object and how to make your controller class as a Spring WebMVC controller using at controller annotation, so that the controller will take the model object and puts that in the template file that is identified by the view. The third point what we have seen, by making at controller and at response body annotations, you can send the Java objects which are converted by the appropriate message converters or the media type converters when you annotate the handler mapping method or the controller with the at controller and at response body annotations. REST controller, WebMVC controller, and the Bean lifecycle management. All these are being done by the at controller and at response body annotations. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we will discuss about at rest controller annotation. What is the necessity of introducing at rest controller annotation, and what is the difference between at controller and at rest controller annotations. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Please give it a like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.